Welcome back to Switch to Linux. We are talking today about Linux Can Do That. This is a looking at a few of the repeated comments that we got on the Windows videos that we did, where some people were saying, well, I can't really run Windows because of this or that or the other. And I pulled in a few of these comments, and we'll just kind of talk about these, and some of these are legitimate concerns. We're not saying absolutely everybody under every circumstance forever and eternity must always run Linux and nobody can run anything else. If you need to use Windows for something, you can. But our overarching principle is if you want to take control of your operating system, it is just going to take a little bit of willingness to experiment with some things. You can get nearly everything working. Obviously, if you work for like a big graphics company and they mandate you're using Photoshop, there's not much you're going to do except use Windows or Mac. But you could always pick yourself up just a portable hard drive, like one of these easy stores here. You could throw Linux right on this guy here and boot off of that on the same exact computer without changing anything in your main computer. And when you do that, you can run Linux perfectly fine for everything else, thus minimizing the tracking and the things that Microsoft and other applications are doing.
The only thing that they need to keep in mind is that when they do use an external drive, the limiting factor is the USB speed. So it won't be as fast as using an internal SSD.
Yeah, you want a 3.0 or better.
I generally have not actually noticed a lot of difference if you're using a USB 3.0, 3.1 drive in a USB 3 port, usually on the back of the computer, is what works out the best. I don't generally notice a lot of difference between that. Now, I might notice a difference now that I'm running SSDs on most of my systems at this point in time. I might notice a difference on a mechanical hard drive. So yes, that is a limiting factor, especially if you plug that thing into a USB 2 drive and you're like, why is this really slow? It's in a USB 2 drive. So don't do that. That does limit the colors of the ports. Plug it into a blue or a red port. It should work pretty quickly. So here is, we're going to start out because the most commonly thing is talked about is gaming, and people say you can't game on Linux, which is not true, with a little bit of a caveat. So Dan, of course, is our expert gamer, being is that not playing the AAA titles, but Dan, what type of games do you play on Linux?
Well, this is what my Steam library would currently look like. I have American Truck Simulator, and that comes as a Linux native game. So does Euro Truck Simulator. I have Cyberpunk 2077, and they're always updating that game, but it always runs reliable.
Is that native Linux or is that Windows?
No, that is a Windows game.
Okay.
The only two games that are currently that I have that run on Linux are the truck games.
Okay. So everything else is Windows.
Yeah, I have the Elder Scrolls Skyrim Special Edition. I have The Last of Us Part 1, which is a pretty good game. That was a huge download too.
Let me pause real quick for a quick second. He's mentioning games that are Windows games that he's running fine on Linux.
Yeah.
Right. I have Metro Exodus, that runs good on Linux. I have A Plague's Tale Innocence and Requiem. I have both of them. Those are lovely games, excellent graphics. They run great in Steam. These games that I'm mentioning right now are best suited to run it from the Steam client because it offers the most help. I got the BioShock series 1, 2, and BioShock Infinite. BioShock Infinite is a Linux native game too. It's also ported to Linux. I forgot to mention that. But the Complex, Detroit Becoming Human, that one plays well. Fallout 4 plays well. God of War, which is a Sony game, that one plays great. You could actually ruin your controller with that game because you got to push so many buttons all the time to swing the battle axe and stuff.
Nice.
Heavy Rain is also from the same company that makes Detroit Becoming Human. That's a good game. Project Cars 2 plays well. Witcher 3 plays well.
Right. So there's a number of games you're playing now. These are, I recognize some of those games from the cultural perspective. Now, the
Here's
big
what I got
AAA
from
games with anti-cheat, you're not going to get those running on Linux for the most part. But most gaming, you really can, because there's been a lot of forward progress with Proton and getting those compatibility layers working. Go ahead.
If you really want to part for Steam and actually get games that have no DRM from GOG or something like that, this is what I have running in Lutris. Control, the whole Dishonored series, Dishonored 2 and Wrath of the Outsider, Kingdom Come Deliverance, Martha is Dead, the entire Siberia series. I have that, all 4 games. Medium and Uncharted Legacy of Thieves Collection, which is a Sony game as well, and it plays very well in Lutris. The thing with Lutris games is you have to kind of do some tinkering to get them to work. They don't always work right away. You have to find out which switches for the DVX and all that other stuff, and the settings will work out. And sometimes
is there a listing? Will the Proton DB cover those or not? Is that a different?
No, place? But sometimes if you go to lutris.com, you can find an install script which will install the game for you and set all the switches. Or Lutris in their message board will give you some hints on how to get the games to working. Also, another Sony game that plays well is Horizon Zero Dawn, and I have played that both on Steam and on Lutris. It plays better on Lutris than Steam. But
looking for that website, I can't seem to get it running. Let's see.
Which one?
Is it lutris.net?
I don't know.
I have a lutris.net. Is that like a? Is it a fruit? What is that logo? It almost looks like it's like an otter hovering over an orange. What is that thing?
I think you got that part right for one of the icons.
All right. Yeah. So you can look at what games run and
if you go to Lutris to their website and you actually put the name of the game in, you might actually get a list of install scripts.
Give me the name of a game you have on Lutris.
Okay, let's try Uncharted: Legends of the Legendary of Thieves Collection, or you can try Siberia. You can try Horizon Zero
2,
Dawn.
Uncharted 3, Uncharted Legacy of Thieves. Is that what you're talking about? Okay, so there's an Uncharted Legacy of the Thieves. There's a Steam Auto version. There's a GOG Auto version. And
the GOG one's the one I used.
Yeah,
and it installed it for me.
There's an install button there. I'm not sure what that does, but because it's just pulling up probably something that's looking for an application.
What it does is it actually opens up your Steam or your Lutris library for you, and then it starts asking questions where it can find the install files that you downloaded from GOG. Okay. And then it does a window test type install.
Okay. So
and then it toggles all the special switches you need to make your graphics card work and the audio work and all the Windowsy things without the bloat.
So in short here, just so we don't spend the entire show on gaming, in short here, gaming works on Linux. Now, it's not going to work for absolutely every game. It's not going to work perfectly for absolutely every game. And it's not going to work on your big AAAs with anti-cheat stuff. But if you're looking at doing some other general basic gaming, Linux isn't going to be a problem. Of course, you can always get if you have a system capable enough of running Linux, you can install a virtualization and do some Windows as well.
There is one caveat, okay? If you can't find it on GOG and you can't find it on Steam, it's most likely probably in the Epic Game Store. Mm-hmm. And from what I understand, the stuff in the Epic Game Store, you have to be able to install their client on a Windows machine because their games are DRM locked.
Okay.
So you may not be able to play like Alan Wake 2. I really wanted to play that game because it's a cousin to the game Control I told you about. Mm-hmm. But, the way they have it locked up is kind of so you have to play it on Windows.
Yeah.
So there are a few games that are like that.
One more thing on this before we move on to other things, because we want to do more than just gaming.
Right.
This commenter says some games from Steam stopped working recently. Only reason kept coming back to Windows. Any commentary on that? Have you heard of that? Any knowledge about that? Or does anybody have any knowledge about that?
I don't like that stuff.
It could be a number of things. It could be a driver change. Some games like certain graphics drivers better than others.
Yeah.
It could be that Steam actually, if they're running that game under Proton Experimental, that changes quite frequently, and it could actually break your game. You want to try a Steam Proton that's an actual version number and does not say Proton Experimental.
Okay. Sabu?
Yeah, so just before we leave gaming, I am a packager, so I package a few things, including a couple of games on my Linux distribution. One of them is called AAA. So I didn't know this term for games existed until I started packaging this game. And then when I started searching for it, I got all kinds of results having nothing to do with the game that I was packaging. This game is a Java game, so it works on everything. And it's Axis and Allies open source clone.
If you like Sony games almost always eventually, after they've run their big money on the Sony PlayStation, they do turn up on PC, to get either through Steam or through GOG.
So moving off of this, this person said, there is never a reason to switch to Linux with broken packages and, he says, respiratories. I think he meant repositories. Windows is the king of gaming. It's simple to get with the times and get a new PC. So obviously we're not going to address the gaming again since we just did that for quite a while. It's not as simple to just get with the times and get a new PC. I'm not sure if you've checked gas prices and food prices and things like that, but not everybody is made with enough money to go out to the store and buy a brand new computer when their old one works perfectly fine. Of course, we're talking about not everybody can push up to Windows 11, and they're trying to aggressively do that, which means we're going to see those of us in the Linux world are going to be happy when all these Windows 10 computers hit the market, and we'll have this amazing computers that we can install Linux on.
By that, more and more new games.
Yeah, so then, of course, with broken packages and repositories, we want to make sure, there's not a ton of broken packages and repositories in Linux. We'll address those a little bit more in the end, but if you're looking for a reason to hate Linux, you can find one. You can find reasons to hate Windows and Linux and Mac, quite universally. But yeah, there are occasionally a couple packages that come up broken, particularly if you're using something like Arch. I've had times when Manjaro breaks Bluefish Editor, which is a critical application I use day to day in web design. And, I know how to roll it back. Yes, that is a little bit of a concern, particularly if you're running something like Arch. But if you're running Debian, not as much. I will say that there were elements of GIMP that were broken on Linux Mint as well, which I pushed updates today on my Edge Linux Mint computer. Those are actually resolved, which I didn't actually see an update for GIMP, but they are still resolved. It might have been in a backend library or something. So, go ahead, Mark.
I'm sure the title of the video is nothing remotely Windows versus Linux for gaming. So
we've already addressed gaming. All we're going to address for now.
I know.
We're going over the comments that we've had on the Windows ones and reasons people said you can't switch to Linux, and we're just kind of addressing some of those. The next one we're going to get to is printers, and Salbu does bring a really good point as well, that there are a lot more printers than we think of. However, what my point is, at least here in America, I don't know what it is everywhere else. Here in America, if I go into any box store, I'm only going to see printers from Brother, Epson, Canon, HP. Every one of those has Linux drivers available. In fact, at Brother, literally every printer on Brother, you can go over, you can go to their download section directly from the website. Here's the RPM. Here's the dep packages.
There was some talk about a year ago that all the printer drivers, they were going to make them all the same for all the printers for Linux.
Well, Windows is working on a standard for that, which would actually be a really good thing if we get one standard, because it means we don't have to have hundreds of thousands of drivers for every printer under the sun. I support that.
Certain distros printing works out of the box.
Yeah, and MX Linux, surprisingly, every single printer I've ever thrown at MX Linux is like, I have discovered you. Like printers, I have a hard time working on Linux Mint or Arch or anything else. MX Linux is like, I know what that printer is. Like, how did you do this? Run with the Dolphin? You were a genius.
Baked in the kernel, yeah.
Yeah, they did come out with about a year ago a universal Linux printer driver installer, where all you have to do is go into the settings and click on the printer icon, and then it will go out and find you your drivers.
Yeah, as long as the drivers are available. Salvo, go ahead.
Yeah, so most manufacturers do have drivers, and there is 2 or 3 different ways that they do this. HP has for a long time have had, at least on Linux and Mac, and the Unix world, they have one single package that have all available printer drivers, and it's called HP Lip. But they have recently,
if companies that weren't evil did the same thing, that'd be great. But go ahead.
And they have recently, as in a couple of years, started shipping printers where the driver is not in the HP Lip package, which I think is a real shame. So if anyone working in HP or listening to this at some point, please fix that. Put all your drivers in the HP Lip package, even if it has to be in the binary only thing that users have to manually download. Put it in that package which has all this, so users don't have to download a tarball to pack that open and then run a few scripts inside.
And I have found that the Linux kernel does handle a lot of printer drivers. Like I wanted to get a smaller printer. I had a bigger printer here, which I hauled it around in the back of my van because it also had a scanner. Well, the scanner stopped working, so I ended up buying that little portable scanner. I'm like, well, I want a smaller printer, and I was in the market looking around. I see one of the smaller Brother laser printers in a pawn shop for $10. I'm like, I'll take that. No drivers needed. I just plug it right into the computer on a USB port and it prints. You know,
space saving as
that's
well.
On Linux Mint.
Yeah, I remember when 2 years ago, I think now, when I configured a Linux Mint laptop for friends of my parents from Ukraine who lived with them until the local authorities got around to giving them a house, refugees and so on. So I installed it and used the OEM installer option, and it worked great. And then when she started, and I showed her how to do a few things, and the printer, network printer at my parents' house, it just showed up in her system. So yeah.
In fact, at the one conference I go to for completely lacking the wisdom of Solomon, they have 100 printers connected to their Wi-Fi public that they give people. I plugged my Linux Mint into their Wi-Fi once. That was a mistake. I was getting nothing but printer notifications for a half hour. My machine I was like, oh boy, I should do fun things with this. That would be fun.
Yeah, I remember a friend of mine had this happen. This was in the year 2000, I think, or 2001. She and her sister.
Printing is king on Linux.
So she just bought an apartment which had a big NAT network. So they shared a single DSL line amongst 30 apartments. Wow. So they had a single Ethernet network in 2 blocks, apartment blocks complex. And she had needed something fixed, so I went to her place, and I did nothing but sit down at her computer, and then her printer started doing things. And it turned out that someone had figured out that everyone was in the same local network, and which is not a bad thing, but you should isolate the IP addresses from one another.
Yeah.
Which they didn't, because they used a home router in order to accomplish this, and they're not the best to do. So they came out a single sheet of paper which said that having your printers and your networking drives exposed to the local network of the apartment block was not a good idea, and there was some recommendation on how to turn that off. So I fixed that for her while sitting there. And he also put the same document on the desktop of her Windows computer at the time.
Yeah, and this person says printers don't, not all printers work with Linux. It's true, not all printers work with Linux. I'm not sure all printers work with Windows either. He says, or they do print, but maintenance or functionality is lost. I think you're looking for a reason to not like Linux. Like, what functionality? It prints. And there is print maintenance tools inside of the printer GUI applications. At least in Cinnamon and a few other distros I've used, you can get in there. You can do some maintenance. You can look at different things.
They're sparse at default. They're sparse, but I'm sure you could get some added capabilities if you look for the right packages.
Yeah, but what added capabilities? It's a printer. It has one function.
Oh, I know.
To print.
I know. I mean, I will say in his defense, HP has a really nice maintenance set of tools.
But HP is the devil, so we're not talking about that.
Yes, I agree.
HP, you're buying the ink, not the printer.
Oh, I know, but my point is, guys, what he's saying is when you go in to service a printer for like a client, or your own printers on your local area network, it's nice to have the ability to clean the print heads and stuff. There's a few things you can do in an HP printer, for better or worse, that you cannot do in others on Linux.
I believe I have seen the option to clean print headers. Okay. However, a lot of modern network printers that are all wanting to be all online, you can go to an IP address for the printer and do all that stuff in the web browser.
Yeah.
So we don't need these extra, as the Oatmeal put it in his one cartoon, 900 megabyte printer bloat.exe. We don't need that.
And you also can, if you print a single sheet of, every month or every 2 months, then you don't have to do the print head cleaning as often.
Yeah.
Whereas if you use a laser printer, you don't have to do this at any point. You can buy a brand new printer or even a used one, configure it and have it a new toner and everything. Print 20 pages or something, and then just let it sit for 2 years or 5 years, and nothing will block anything. And in those next 5 years, when you need to print a new batch or something, it will just work, and you don't need to buy new ink. And
I was wrong. It's crapprinterbundle.exe for 600 megabytes. Of course, we have to remember that this was written about 15 years ago, and so that's modern day several hundred more. And then, of course, you get the chance to learn what printers or what two robots screwing each other sounds like. Click, 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 click. And then we get, of course, the error messages. I've come to believe my printer produces cryptic error message simply using words like load and tray and rendering them. Spool error, load tray error to your mom's mouth. Ha ha. Okay. Ink cartridges, pen, 15 cents. Plastic contained in ink. Ink cartridge, $25. Ink contained in plastic. And then we have can't print some black and white document because you're currently out of cyan. Expiration dates. What? And then unfortunate timing. Ha, ha, ha. There you go. So if you've never seen the Oatmeal cartoons, I'm not sure if they're any good anymore, but I did get plenty of enjoyment out of that one in past days. So the next one, we're moving into a couple of all miscellaneous ones. You may still need Windows to update your hardware. I think he's probably thinking like BIOS firmware upgrades and things like that. This is true in some instances. It depends on your hardware. If you're building a computer for Linux, you might research this. Like my board, I do not have to run Windows to update the firmware on my board. I can do it with a USB drive. So
yeah, and in many cases, the firmware updates or hardware updates, they don't particularly need Windows per se, but they need a DOS environment. So using there is a few of those who have this a while ago since I did this, but a few manufacturers will have an option to download the free DOS file, which you put on a USB stick or a CD-ROM or whatever, and then it boots into the firmware update using the free DOS utility.
Yeah. So this can be a valid concern, but there's ways around it. But also, we don't need to update the firmware on our hardware frequently. Every now and again, maybe, but not frequently.
And I've also heard of at least one distribution which it's a live something, and its whole purpose is to upgrade hardware. So you have either flash it with the files on it, or you give it a URL or whatever. So there is options to do this.
Let me see if I can find that. I will mention, though, that there is modern... is it modern? I think Ubuntu might be able to. I know System 76 Pop! OS can, and it might be something that's built in a GNOME now. There are some Linux distributions that can manage firmware updates directly from the GNOME settings panel. So that might be something you can do. I'm trying to see if I can find a firmware that does that. Like here's a Debian wiki on upgrading firmware. Let's see what that has to say. Have not read this one, but let's see. There's grub image boot. And then here's an ISO 7WUJ43UC.ISO for boot images for upgrading. I don't know. I'd have to look into that more. So here's... Okay, so FWUPD can update Latitude series, Lenovo ThinkPads, HP EliteBooks. So there's some options. You just need to do the research. That can be a valid criticism that not every Linux distribution is going to be able to upgrade every piece of firmware. OneDrive application not working on Linux Mint. Okay, so I'm sorry, I haven't used Microsoft in a long time. Is there a desktop OneDrive application?
Are we talking about like firmware for like the motherboard?
Yeah.
A lot of desktops now, the motherboards are sold with something called, I believe it's called Easy Flash, or you just stick it in a special port in the back and you hold down a button until a green light starts blinking. And then you let go of it and it's installing it, and the computer don't even have to be powered up.
Yeah, that's what mine has. So, and
all the other computers that I've played with, you go into the BIOS and you do your flash from the BIOS.
Yep, correct. Okay, let's get back to this one. Is there a desktop OneDrive application? I was under the assumption that Windows just did that automatically from the GUI.
I remember when I still worked at the second-hand shop before I moved into this house. So I managed the computer in the office. And we were told that corporate was going to start using the Microsoft OneDrive and another thing. And there is packages for it, but it was so for the distribution that I chose to use, it was a little difficult, and I didn't manage to get to it before I moved. And 3 months later, they replaced it with a Windows install. So, but I know it exists.
Yeah, GNOME 46 natively now supports OneDrive. So if you go in on GNOME 46, so the new Ubuntu, new Fedora, anything else running GNOME 46, you go in to the online accounts, sign in with your Microsoft account, and you can manage your OneDrive from there. I don't know if that's an automated, like I said, I don't know what application they're talking about here. Is this a standalone desktop application? Is this something for syncing files? I don't know exactly what the case is, but there are ways of getting OneDrive working on Linux. And then what method to use, similar, what method to use to syncing Google Drive on Linux. Online Accounts always has managed Google Drive, I think. Again, I don't use those. So I use Nextcloud. Yes, I can sync my Nextcloud account to Linux all day long. So as far as syncing Google Drive, again, I don't know. I know you can access it. I don't know how much syncing capabilities. I'm sure there's probably an application out there for Linux that can do it, being as that Linux distributions have long been able to manage a Google Drive. I just haven't research how to do that specifically. So,
and I know that Nextcloud has an option for you to sync with Dropbox for things.
Yeah, so there's options there. Anything else on those, or anything else that we missed in the scope of the video on things Linux can do that Windows users don't think Linux can do? Otherwise, we'll have our very last point, and then we'll wrap up the recording part. All right. Here's my last point. Linux will do almost anything. Now, if you're looking for an excuse to say Linux sucks, you can find it. But if you're saying, I do value my privacy, I do value the some of the concerns that are being expressed in Windows collecting so much data and things like that, we can understand that. If you're looking for an excuse, you can find it. But if you're looking to be more private and take control of your computer, you can find that as well. It just takes being willing to give it a try. Even if it's not full-time, even if it's not for everything, I'd still encourage everybody to pick up a drive, if nothing else, just burn a live instance on it and play around with that live instance and see what it can do. Even without changing anything on your computer. So that's what we have to say. Any other final thoughts on that?
So I've heard that there was a video I saw the other day. There is one area that Windows and maybe Mac still it might be required. And that is for those who, for some reason, either insist on or is forced to use the Adobe Premiere Video editor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is true. Oh, I did forget one more. I don't know how it didn't end up in my thing in there, because it was the first thing I asked. One person said in there that auto mechanics has to use Windows and there's no exceptions. Things that I talked to my guys at Fresh Vintage. And he actually said most of the scanning tools and things that they're using for doing at least the diagnostics, those all actually work with Android. So the question is, will those also work on Lineage or Graphene? Probably.
A lot of them are standalone. So you get a standalone box you plug into your UV.
Yeah. Now, there are, he did say, though, he would agree that for some scan tools, the higher end scan tools, Bosch or Snap, they use interfaces with some custom Windows only software the company only wrote for Windows 10. He says some of those, and he might also be talking about fine-tuning machine computers. So like one of the better van life channels is Van City Van Life, and he just put a new engine in his van, and they put a module in that a guy can go in there, and even over the air, he can make modifications to his engine's computer system to make it, like, hey, I'm going and driving up in the mountains tomorrow. The guy's like, all right. And he'll over the air push an update to his van that makes it more efficient at driving up mountains. So that software might work only with Windows. So you might get stuff like that, which is certainly a valid concern, in which case, yeah, you either need to have a Windows installation laying around or a virtual box or things like that. So that was the last one I've forgotten about, but I had the information there. So yeah, I mean, there's a reason to hate it, and there's a reason to be willing to try it, and it just takes a little bit of time. So we're going to wrap up the recording part there. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.